and she showed me her garden. And I found my heart. I was 28 years old when I realized I had been holding my breath for most of my life. The morning Isabella Santos knocked on my apartment door with dirt under her, fingernails and a crack in her terracotta pot. I had no idea that the woman, standing there with soil-streaked cheeks and apologetic eyes, would become the reason I finally learned to breathe. She was my new neighbor, she explained, voice soft as morning light, and she had accidentally broken this pot while moving in. Did I happen to have any super glue? I didn't, but I invited her in anyway. And when she stepped across my threshold, something shifted in the air between us, something I couldn't name but felt in every hollow space inside my chest. My life before Isabella had been a carefully constructed performance. I worked as a corporate consultant, wore neutral blazers and sensible heels, kept my hair in a neat bun, and dated men my mother approved of with the same enthusiasm one might have for a dental appointment. I had mastered the art of being exactly what everyone expected, of shrinking myself into shapes that fit other people's comfort zones. My last relationship had ended 6 months earlier, when Marcus proposed at a family dinner, and I said yes, with a smile that felt like glass, cutting my face. I broke off the engagement 2 weeks later, unable to articulate why the thought of forever with him felt like drowning. My mother cried. My father stopped calling. My sister told me I was being selfish, that I didn't know how good I had it. And maybe she was right. Maybe I was searching for something that didn't exist. This unnamed hunger that kept me awake at night, staring at my ceiling and wondering why I felt so utterly alone even when I was never by myself. Isabella was different from anyone I had ever known. She was a landscape designer who spoke about plants, the way poets speak about love, with reverence and wonder and an intimacy that made my skin feel too tight. Over the following weeks, we fell into an easy friendship. She would knock on my door in the evening, sometimes with wine, sometimes with cuttings from her growing collection of plants, always with stories that made the world seem bigger and more beautiful than I had ever allowed it to be. She told me about the garden she was designing in the shared courtyard of our building, how she wanted to create a space where people could remember what it felt like to be connected to the earth, to something real and growing. I found myself watching her hands as she spoke, the way they moved through the air like they were sculpting invisible things, and I wondered what it would feel like to be touched with that much attention, that much care. The garden took shape slowly over late spring and into summer. Isabella worked in the courtyard every weekend, and I began joining her, drawn by something I couldn't explain. I had never been interested in plants, had killed every succulent, well-meaning co-workers had ever given me. But with Isabella, everything felt different. She taught me how to prepare soil, how to understand what each plant needed, how to listen to the language of roots and leaves. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, and sometimes our hands would brush as we reached for the same tool, and the touch would send electricity racing up my arm, leaving me breathless and confused. I started making excuses to see her, showing up at her door with coffee in the mornings, asking questions about plants I didn't really care about, just to hear her voice, just to be near her. I told myself it was friendship, this consuming need to be in her presence. But late at night, alone in my bed, I knew I was lying to myself. The truth crashed over me one evening. In July, when Isabella cut her hand on a broken piece of pottery, we were planting jasmine along the courtyard wall and she hissed in pain, blood welling quickly from a deep gash across her palm. I grabbed her hand without thinking, pressed my shirt against the wound to stop the bleeding, and in that moment, with her blood on my hands and her face inches from mine, I understood with devastating clarity what I had been running from my entire life. I loved her, not the safe, comfortable love I had tried to feel for Marcus or any of the men before him, but something wild and terrifying and absolutely real. I loved the way she laughed with her whole body, the way she saw beauty in broken things, the way she made me feel like I was finally allowed to be myself. And the realization didn't feel like freedom. It felt like falling off a cliff. I pulled away from her, mumbled something about getting bandages, and practically ran to my apartment. I locked the door and slid down against it, heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. For 3 days I avoided her. I left for work early, came home late, ignored her texts asking if I was okay. I was terrified. Not just of what I felt, but of what it meant about who I was, about the life I had built, about every choice I had ever made. I had spent 28 years becoming the person everyone wanted me to be, and now I was faced with the possibility that she had been a stranger all along. The person I actually was, the person who loved Isabella Santos with an intensity that made my bones ache, didn't fit into the neat narrative I had constructed, and I didn't know if I was brave enough to tear it all down. On the fourth day, Isabella showed up at my door again. This time she didn't ask for super glue or offer wine. She just stood there, bandaged hand against her chest, and said my name like a question. I wanted to close the door, to protect us both from what I knew was coming, but instead I stepped aside and let her in. We sat on my couch, the same couch where Marcus had proposed, and the silence between us was heavy with all the things I had never been brave enough to say. Isabella spoke first. She told me she understood if I needed space, if our friendship had become too much, but she wanted me to know that I had changed her life. She said that for the first time since her own painful coming, out 5 years earlier, she had felt truly seen by someone, truly known. And then she said the words that shattered and remade me all at once. She told me she was in love with me, had been since that first morning with the broken pot, and if I couldn't return those feelings, she would respect that. But she couldn't keep pretending that what existed between us was just friendship. The words I had been holding back for months came tumbling out in a mess of tears and confessions. I told her everything, about Marcus and the engagement I couldn't go through with, about the lifetime of feeling wrong in my own skin, about the nights I had lain awake thinking about her, hands in her laugh and the way she said my name. I told her I was terrified, that I didn't know how to be this person, that I had never allowed myself to even consider that I might be anything other than what my family expected. And through it all, Isabella just listened, her dark eyes steady on mine, her damaged hand reaching across the space between us to hold mine. When I finally ran out of words, she pulled me close, and I buried my face in her neck and cried for every year I had spent pretending, for every version of myself I had abandoned, for the girl I had been who had never learned that she was allowed to want what she wanted. Our first kiss happened in the garden she had built, surrounded by jasmine and lavender and roses that bloomed in impossible colors. It was early morning, the sun just beginning to paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, and we were supposed to be watering the new plantings. Instead, Isabella cupped my face in her hands, bandage rough against my cheek, and asked if she could kiss me. I nodded, unable to speak, and when her lips met mine, I understood for the first time what people meant when they talked about coming home. The kiss was soft and tentative and absolutely perfect, and when we pulled apart, I was crying again, but this time from joy, from relief, from the overwhelming sensation of finally being exactly where I was supposed to be. The months that followed were not easy. Coming out in my late 20s meant confronting every assumption I had ever made about myself, every lie I had told to fit in. My mother didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. My father sent one text that said he needed time to process. My sister called me brave, then asked why I couldn't have figured this out before I hurt Marcus, as if my self-discovery was an inconvenience to everyone around me. I lost friends who couldn't reconcile the person they thought they knew with the woman who now held Isabella's hand in public. At work, I faced whispers and sideways glances from colleagues who had attended my engagement party. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, when I wondered if it would have been easier to just keep pretending, to marry Marcus and live the life everyone expected. But then Isabella would take my hand or kiss my forehead, or simply exist beside me in her garden, and I would remember that easy had never been the same thing as right. Isabella taught me how to grow, not just plants but myself. She showed me that breaking open was sometimes necessary for new things to take root, that the most beautiful gardens often grew from the places where the ground had been completely torn up and started over. We spent our evenings in the courtyard she had created, surrounded by the life she had coaxed from soil and seed, and I learned that love wasn't about fitting into someone else's vision of who you should be. It was about being witnessed fully, in all your messy, complicated truth, and being cherished anyway. She saw every broken part of me, every fear and doubt and moment of panic, and she never asked me to be anything other than exactly who I was. 1 year after that first knock on my door, Isabella and I planted a cherry tree in the center of the courtyard garden. It was her idea, a living monument to new beginnings, to the courage it takes to bloom. As we worked the soil around its roots, our hands tangled together in the dirt, I thought about the woman I had been when we met. That frightened, suffocated version of myself felt like someone from another lifetime. I had lost things in choosing this life, this love. My relationship with my parents was still strained, careful and formal in a way that ached. Some friendships had ended permanently. I had left my corporate job for something that paid less but felt more aligned with who I actually was. But I had gained something infinitely more precious. I had gained myself. And I had gained this extraordinary woman who had shown me her garden and, in doing so, had given me permission to finally tend to my own wild, overgrown heart. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt the weight of living a life that wasn't truly yours, or if you believe in the courage it takes to choose love over fear, please let me know by liking this video and sharing it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your support means everything and helps these stories reach the hearts that need them most. Today, Isabella and I still live in that same building, though now we share an apartment, the one that used to be hers because it has better light for her, ever-expanding plant collection. The courtyard garden has become a gathering place for our neighbors, a testament to what can grow when you're brave enough to put your hands in the dirt and believe something beautiful is possible. My mother eventually came around, slowly and with many difficult conversations, but she came. She even complimented the garden once, which Isabella and I both recognized as the olive branch it was. My father still struggles, but he tries, and I've learned that sometimes trying is enough. Before I finish, I want to ask you something. If you've ever had a moment that changed everything, a person who helped you find yourself, or a garden that became your sanctuary, would you share it in the comments below? I read every single one, and your stories inspire me more than you know. Every morning I wake up next to the woman who taught me how to grow, how to bloom, how to be unapologetically myself. We drink coffee in the garden she built, surrounded by jasmine and roses and that cherry tree that grows taller every year. Isabella still has dirt under her fingernails most days, and I still sometimes catch myself marveling at the fact that this is my life now, real and messy and absolutely mine. She showed me her garden, and in its soil and seeds and stubborn beauty, I found something I'd been searching for my entire life. I found my heart. I found my home. I found the courage to finally bloom.